There are shows that you watch and just move on from, becoming forgettable in the process. There are also shows that are good but are just that. They check all the boxes but are missing that it factor that takes a show to the next level. Cyberpunk Edgerunners for me was obviously not the forgettable type. It definitely checked all the boxes, and you guessed it had that it factor, which made it something special. The story takes place in Night City, a futuristic corrupt dystopia run by corporations whose only interest is the unrelenting advancement of their own needs, with complete disregard for anything else, which has resulted in a wide social class division among the inhabitants of Night City. You've got your spoiled rich kids and people who are not dealt the same card as them, who try their hardest not to succumb to the decadence of the world they're brought into, and David Martinez, our MC, is the latter. David is one of the top students in the most prestigious school in Night City, Arasaka Academy, and lives in a single mom household. Their family is poor and his mom wants him to have a better future, so she works to the bones, barely scraping by to pay for his tuition, and this adds more pressure on David not to disappoint his mom, hence his good grades. But David gets into trouble when he illegally modifies his cyberware to avoid paying, which gets him into trouble with the school. He's taking a ride home with his mom after what transpired until they get caught in the crossfires of a gang shootout and they crash. His mom is severely injured and is in a comatose state. The next day, David gets his ass kicked by his bully and receives the horrible news that his mom has passed. Talk about having a bad day. And all this happens in just the first episode. David's world falls apart unexpectedly in a blink of an eye. What does one do when confronted with such a reality? Well, for David, that's being a cyberpunk. David implants a military-grade equipment that was stolen by his mom, and first thing he does is deliver a much-needed beatdown of the bully. David is then expelled from school, has no money or friends to rely upon. He has lost everything until a chance encounter with a cyberpunk named Lucy. Lucy and David do a job together and get along pretty well. She even invites him to her house and also opens up to him about what she wants, but it turns out she did all this to sell him out to a bunch of cyberpunks who are after the Sandiviston, which is David's implant. They ask him where he found the Sandy, to which he replies it was in his mom's possession. It turns out that David's mom was trying to sell the Sandy to the leader of this cyberpunk squad called Maine, and David's mom and Maine were actually friends. Maine, out of respect for David's mom, becomes reluctant to take any drastic measures against David, which for me signified that even among this band of thieves there's some notion of honor and aren't just some one-dimensional mindless brutes. David tries to prove that he can actually be of use to them and use the Sandy, demonstrating the insane adaptability he has to it, which impresses the gang and gets him accepted as their newest member. Seeing David get acquainted with this new chaotic but exciting group of cyberpunks was a blast to watch. His mentor-student relationship with Mine gradually progresses, and seeing what happens later on in the series where Mine goes cyber psycho in episode 6 was gut-wrenching. And speaking of episode 6, that is easily one of the best episodes that came out last year, bar none. The way Mine starts to slowly lose grip of his mind, making him kill one of his loved one in the process, emphasizing how terrifying cyberpsychosis can be and raising up questions of what will become of David when he inevitably is faced with the same exact fate, which adds a whole other level of tension and intrigue, was truly brilliant. The characters in the show, even though we had less time dedicated to them, carried the show hard, and maybe that's due to the vibrant and bombastic way Studio Trigger handles their stories, but in this particular one it's obvious they just didn't rely on the over-the-top nature of their style. The character work in this anime was exemplary, and to have achieved it in just 10 episodes is astounding. You've got a character like David who you sympathize with just off of the first episode. You go through so many highs and lows with him. His world falls apart and gains a whole new family just to see it crumble, and he has to take the burden of keeping it together cause he feels responsible for Mine's death. The inevitable cyberpsychosis catches up to him and we see him react the same way Mine did. The cyberpsychosis gets really bad for David that he commits an action that will forever haunt him, the murder of a woman who has a son waiting for her, which triggers the memory of his mom and the deep-seated feeling he has of his mom passing away while being disappointed in him. This was harrowing and just emphasized for me just how much of a tragic character David is. But throughout all this, Lucy is by his side, and when it gets revealed the information Lucy gained from hacking into Tanaka's mind in episode 6 wasn't nothing, and that she kept fighting the Arasaka people throughout the time skip while keeping it hidden from David just so she could protect him, solidified her as one of my favorite characters in the show. Also, the character progression that we see from her wanting to leave Earth and just go to the moon to sacrificing it all for David, but then goes on to achieve it anyways but without David, was one that I really appreciate, and it made for an amazing ending scene. We've also got Rebecca, a character that succeeded to be charming with just a couple of scenes, and her death, come on Trigger, you didn't have to do her dirty like that. The world building of Cyberpunk Edgerunners was off the charts, and yes, Cyberpunk Edgerunners may have the unfair advantage of building this world since it's based on the game that has an already established world, but me watching this, a person who has no knowledge of the game, things like trauma teams, a corporation who detect your location as soon as something endangering happens and provide medical services, people modifying themselves and slowly transforming into a completely different entity, and many similar stuff like this were utterly fascinating and made me more invested. One of the major criticisms this anime faces is that it feels rushed, and I've got to agree with that one. Even though I've praised the character development, we could have had a more in-depth look into it by witnessing the events of the time skip. Also, there were a ton of characters I wished I've gotten to know better, like Kiwi, Faraday, Atom Smasher, and even Falco. And I don't think 10 episodes does exploring a world this interesting justice. But other than that, this anime is really good, and if you haven't watched it, get on it ASAP. If you like the content, make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure to check my other content. And with that said, catch you guys later.